All right, welcome to Halitics on Monday. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and joining me this morning is Arlen Grossman. And Arlen, it's great to see you. I am smiling. You told me I need to smile more, so here is your Monday morning smile.
Good. You got to look like you're enjoying the show, that you want to be there.
Well, I am enjoying this, and I do want to be here. And I want to just real quickly just flag an event that caused me to miss two programs last week. I was up in New York for the program for the Elizabeth's Radical Agenda at the West Side Comedy Show with a good close friend of mine from college. We had a great time. Sat right in the front row. It was really fun. You all have met Elizabeth a few times on Halitics, and it was just a real nice program. Not all, I'm not really into all the obscenities and the MFers and everything, and that's not what you got. It was more like a PG to, a low, easy R show, not an X in any way. So that was a lot of fun. And so I really enjoyed it. I just want to give a quick shout out. We'll have Elizabeth back again. Today, though, is with Arlen. And Arlen, I want to give you props here. You can see the promotional shot there that I've used. I always forget the right word for it. I guess it's not a meme. I don't know. The slide you have been saying for some time now, and you are far more of a Democrat than I am, far more of a staunch supporter of the Democrats than I am, that Joe Biden is worrisome, is a risk. Looks like you were right, and we're going to get into that. But anything in particular over the past week before I go to first Trump's interview on Meet the Press and then Biden's flubs last week, which we did touch on with you and with other guests that have kind of even triggered to a greater degree your spidey sense that unless there's a change at the top of the ticket, Trump may get reelected.
Well, I don't know, Cal, there's another speech. I don't know if you heard about it on Friday that Trump gave where he made some horrendous gaffes. I mean, he kept mentioning Obama that he's running against rather than Biden. And then he kept talking about if we're not careful, we're going to get into World War II. So this is Trump. He's losing it too. I don't know if Biden is, but certainly Trump is.
Yeah, I didn't know about that at all, but you did flag for me, and you may have flagged that for me as well, the Friday speech. Yeah. So we won't get to that because I don't have that at my disposal. You did flag for me the Meet the Press interview where I have to say my sense from, and I didn't watch the whole hour and 15 minutes. My sense was Trump came across pretty well. He actually presented well. There were a lot of whoppers, as he is always prone to tell, but he seemed very quick. He was, on point. He didn't seem to ramble. I don't know if that's how you felt when you watched it.
No, I didn't. I didn't think he came across that well. But what I really liked about the interview was Kristen Welker, after each segment, would come on the air, would do a little fact checking or summarizing, which I've never seen anybody else do. And I think that's necessary for anyone that interviews Trump. Because he, as you say, he lies all the time. He tells all kinds of whoppers. And if the network comes on right afterwards, somebody on the network can give some fact checking, that helps.
So there's no question what this tells us. Arlen and I watching the same interview to a significant degree. I didn't see the Welker fact checks. I just went through this at the end to watch the actual interaction between the two, which is what I saw on YouTube. I didn't see her digress. That may have been on the live TV that I didn't see, Arlen. But again, where you stand is often where you sit, or where you sit is where you stand. I really did think, and again, I caught Trump in a lot of whoppers. I don't know if the fact checking is so effective, and I'll tell you why. Because the people who are prone to support Trump are not going to find those fact checks and the least bit persuasive. They're just going to view it again as the media trying to undermine him. But when it came to the actual back and forth, Trump did well.
Well, we can't just let him get away with everything. I mean, he has to be called out a lot of the time. And that's why I liked seeing that. He's called out. He's not telling the truth, so, his people have to see that too. And hopefully it gives them a little bit of doubt.
Oh, no question. I mean, I do think he should be, I don't think the media should give him a pass at all. In fact, I think these long form interviews are absolutely play to his strengths. If they're really that dogged against him, I would play the clips that I wouldn't even give him all that time. I think I don't think it's very helpful. But let's go through, in terms of, it's not elucidating, but I'm just making the point. I think he presents pretty well to his audience and maybe to independents as well, who are often want to disbelieve the media. By the way, you're watching Halitics, 240-363-7190. By the way, I am want to disbelieve the media myself. 240-363-7190. And I'll tell you why, Arlen, real quick, because the interests of MSNBC or NBC, CBS, NBC, Disney, the people who own this, the multi-billionaires who actually run these corporations, their interests are very different than those of the vast majority of the American public. Their interest is to have low wages, few, if any, trade barriers, lots and lots of military spending, and those are not my interests. No mandatory health care for all. So their interests are very different than mine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But I'm so happy to see Trump interviewed by somebody other than somebody on Fox News. Not a Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or one of those types. To see somebody different, and I think this is his first real interview with a network. Host.
Well, I think it's pretty good that they did this. I agree with you in general. I just hope it's not wall to wall. I mean, I think one of the big advantages Trump had in 2016 was there was wall to wall coverage of him, and he got all that earned, quote, it's called earned media, where you don't pay for it, and that helped propel him to victory. That said, there was really no one much better, certainly in the Republican primary, and maybe not in the Democratic, the nominee either. All right, here's Kristen Welker questioning Trump. Let's get right to this.
Are you looking to appoint an attorney general who will prosecute the people you tell them to prosecute?
I'm looking to appoint an attorney general who's going to be tough on crime and fair. Very simple.
Speaker.
All right, so that's complete nonsense. Trump has always demonstrated that he just wants people who will do what he tells them. But the answer is what I'm saying. It sounded plausible, right? If you were not disinclined to believe Trump, or you simply weren't really paying attention, you would say, okay, well, he says he's not going to appoint somebody who's just looking to settle scores and do whatever I tell them.
Well, I think this is considerably better than that CNN town hall they had a few weeks back, which was horrendous, and where he got to say anything he wanted, never really got questioned, and the audience was cheering him on because they were mostly a Republican audience. So at least this one, you don't have his fans in the background. You have a competent, host in Kristen Welker, and like I say, after each segment, which you may not have seen, but the people that watched it on TV saw that she would, say some things that he had gotten wrong. She would fact check him a little bit, and that's absolutely.
I'm really sorry I don't have that. I feel bad, Arlen, because that obviously would have been an important part of this. And maybe we'll try to, if we can, even next week, we'll come back with that, because I can't redo that. I can't reinvent that wheel at this point. But let's get back to this. So, and my point isn't even to try to criticize CBS. I mean, in this case, I'm not about criticizing CBS. The point I'm really trying to make here is that Trump, I believe, in these interviews comes across pretty well, especially compared to who he's running against, which supports your theory or your thesis, the Harlan thesis, which millions, tens of millions of Democrats share, which is that Joe Biden is not the right candidate to run for the Democrats in 2024.
Well, Trump comes across as strong, as confident, but he's basically he's got his talking points, and he just goes on and on with the same talking points. Oh, by the way, the network is NBC that does Meet the Press.
Okay, got it. And in fact, you can even see, or at least I can see, if I make it a little bit wider, I'll let everyone see. If I said CBS, I apologize. I did see a CBS. I apologize. Let's see, you can actually see in this clip
Actually, this
that,
was Kristen Welker's initial opportunity to host Meet the Press because Chuck Todd had his last week last week.
so she's the new host,
Yeah.
is that right? And you can actually see, I just reset that video. There's the Meet the Press logo in the bottom right. So, and you
Yeah.
can see NBC. That's really what I was going at, the peacock. You can see the peacock there. So thank you, Arlen. Want to make sure. And again, I think what my whole purpose on doing this is, again, to demonstrate that Biden's in real trouble, that Biden is going to really have difficulty, in my opinion, at this point, defeating Trump. And I think you agree with that, or do you not agree with that, Arlen?
I think there's problems for sure. Right now, they're pretty much neck and neck in the polls, and that shouldn't be the case because Donald Trump is obviously, mentally disturbed. He lies all the time. He doesn't know what he's doing. He commits crimes all the time. He's got 91, felonies against him already. Why?
I mean, but of course,
he is even.
I mean, the flip.
Biden.
Well, maybe it's because also Biden is saying things like, when I was at Ground Zero the day after the attack, when he wasn't there for a week. I mean, he's telling a lot of stories that aren't true, and he may or may not. At this point, my sense is he's kind of demented, and he really believes what he's saying, but he's getting things wrong too.
That's a lot better than Trump, who at the time of 9/11 said, he saw a bunch of Arabs getting together and cheering and having, So,
I mean, I'm not going to, we always get into the back and forth. I think the point is that Biden, forgetting about Trump altogether, Biden is a flawed candidate in a number of ways. And then if you bring Trump into it, Trump does certainly, as you said, come across as strong. And as, at least in this interview, and again, I didn't catch all the mistakes he made on Friday, at least in this interview comes across as, sound of mind, which I don't think Biden does at this point.
Yeah, Biden, for some reason, is very proud or something, but he thinks he could do everything and get everything done, at his age. And I don't think he's realistic because it's not working. The polls are very, they indicate that he's in a lot of trouble, and that he shouldn't be because he's done some.
Well, you always say that. You always say that, Arlen. But I think this is where I think you have a bit of a blind spot. I think you need to be able to see why so many Americans are frustrated by the Democratic Party and by Joe Biden in particular. I wish you could, and maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe they're completely besotted by Fox, but I don't have that much contempt for the American public. I really believe, and I think the evidence strongly supports that, the Democrats, no less than the Republicans, have consistently betrayed poor, struggling, and working people. If you want to say they're better, a little bit less bad, okay, say it. But that's not good enough. They have to show that they're on the side of poor, struggling American workers if they want their support, and they're not doing that. And they don't do that.
Another issue that I want to talk about. I remember years ago, we have to go back decades, when you had Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and all that. And we didn't have all the very partisan networks that they have now. I think Trump wouldn't even be in there. Trump would be, laughed at, and no one would take him seriously. But nowadays it's a whole different story because the right-wing media is very strong. They've got a lot of stations, a lot of,
I do agree with you that Rush Limbaugh definitely was one of the worst actors in American history in terms of his impact. There was a lot of Me Tooism, a lot of copycatism, but, and this is where, again, I really think there's an issue where we have a disconnect. In part, the appeal that people like Limbaugh and Hannity have is because those that they're talking to really do feel left behind. They really do feel that they've gotten a raw deal from the government and from corporate America. And the solutions, in quotes, that people like Hannity and Limbaugh in the past offered only made things worse for them. That is all true. But I don't believe the ground would have been nearly as fertile for these demagogues if it hadn't already been fertilized by decades of neoliberal, anti-union, pro-war policies that both parties pursued. And I think you just simply don't want to acknowledge how the Democratic Party is complicit in the way our political system has devolved since the 50s and 60s.
Well, yeah, I actually do agree with you, Hal. I think the Democratic Party has really gone downhill. At one time, they were for the workers. It was obvious. And now you don't see it as much. I mean, Joe Biden will say, hey, I'm the top pro-union person, but it doesn't really come across in legislation or anything like that. And the rest of the Democratic Party is pretty quiet for most of the time. They're not.
They're all in line. Every last one voted for Hakeem Jeffries, who's the Congress member from Wall Street, whose biggest contributions are from the securities industry and from AIPAC. Every Democrat voted for him. When you have the Republicans who are willing to challenge McCarthy at the drop of a hat, AOC, the squad, they're completely silent.
Yeah, well, again, this all goes back to, as I often say, it's the political system. It's all run by money. Whoever has the most money gets what they want. These politicians live on the donations that they get from these wealthy people. And, so the Democrats probably feel they have no choice but to go along with this because the Supreme Court is saying, hey.
Well, they have a choice. They can just simply refuse to go along with it. They can simply, people like AOC has her own power base. She's raising money in $27, $54 increments. She can easily turn her back on the corporate leadership of the party. She doesn't have to go along with it. Jamie Raskin, he doesn't have to go along with it. He doesn't even raise money from, as far as I can tell, Lockheed Martin, and yet he speaks at their events and is a full-throated endorser of a war that most Americans don't support. I know you do, but most don't. So I do think the Democrats have a problem with Citizens United, but a lot of that also is partly, I mean, we can, there's always a chicken and an egg. And I do, think that you have to recognize as a Democrat, you have these challenges, but I'm not going to give them an excuse for that. I just simply won't. They have to be willing to fight when they have power. When they actually have power, they have not fought hard enough, in my view. They have not fought relentlessly enough against big money and in favor of workers. And that's why people like Trump, that's why Trump is winning. The Republican Party doesn't like Trump either. Trump went up against, he insults them. He went after the Bush family. This is somebody who presents as an opponent. I'm not saying he is, but that's how he presents, as someone who's willing to take on the establishment. And that's why he won. Bernie presented the same way. He was far more, he had far more integrity, and he was also sincere. And he would have won. He would have won in 2016, I believe. But the Democrats refused to embrace him, did everything they could to defeat him, because the Democratic leadership would have preferred Trump to Sanders.
You always make it sound so easy that Sanders and all the Democrats could just say, hey, we want universal health care and we want all these good things, but without getting resistance. But they would have tremendous resistance.
I don't say they wouldn't have a lot of resistance. Of course they would have resistance. Who said that? Bernie always said it. He said, this isn't going to be easy. I can't wave a magic wand. We're going to have to fight. But fight, to have a fight, we need leadership in what now we are seeing leadership. I actually have to say that. I think some of the state Democrats are doing some good things. I like how Gavin Newsom is suing the oil companies. That's leadership. But sadly, that's not something that the American people are necessarily going to rally behind, in my view. If they're not going to necessarily see direct benefits to themselves as a result of this lawsuit, even though I support it. But Americans would see direct benefits if their Congress members, if their senators said, hey, if we can get Medicare for all, you will never, ever again have to worry about paying a health care bill. It will be covered by the government, and we will save money. You will save money. We will. They said it just like that. You know why you hear differently? Because they're liars. The pharmaceutical companies are liars. For-profit healthcare, they're liars because they are protecting their industry. That's why they're doing it. You will be better off when we have universal single-payer healthcare, but we have to fight for it. Now, they could say that, but they don't say it because they're corrupt too.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Democrats could say that, but they would get such resistance, like you're talking about. Republicans would say, oh, this is socialism and this and that. And it wouldn't be easy.
So what? Of course it wouldn't be easy, but you do it because it's right. Because it's because that's what leaders do. Is they fight. It wasn't easy for Dr. King to lead the march from Selma I'm sorry, Selma to Montgomery. It wasn't easy for him to do that. It wasn't easy for I now his name from Atlanta, the SNCC leader, students who got beat up at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I'm struggling here with some of these names, and I apologize. But he was. It wasn't easy for him to lead the people across the bridge, but he did it. So this is and it would be a hell of a lot easier for AOC and the squad to say we're not going to support you, Nancy Pelosi, unless we get a vote. They could say that. They didn't say it.
Well, yeah, it's easy for them to say it, but you have to admit that those times are different than they are now. Now you've got, like I say, all this heavy right-wing propaganda and media. And when you think about it, what does the left have as far as anything to compete with that? There's MSNBC, and that's all I could think of.
Well,
really.
and MSNBC is far from progressive. I mean, MSNBC itself is a corporatist. I would say certainly economically and militarily, it's right-wing. They cheerlead every war. And they attack any Democrat who challenges in any way the Democratic establishment.
Yeah, but the opposition would say, "Oh, this is socialism. This is awful."
Let them say it. Who cares? So that's how they would hurt themselves. Well, you try. That's what leaders do. That's what leaders do.
The risk of getting the Republicans in power even more entrenched.
I disagree. I think the risk comes from when Democrats are elected and then don't make things better for the American people, which is exactly what's happening now.
Well, we do agree on that. I think the Democrats have to do a better job of that, not be so, conditioned to get along with the corporations and all those people who are donating for them. But still, they're considerably better than the Republicans, so they should be doing much better.
Well, we have to disagree there too. On some issues, they're better, or they're not as bad, and others they're just as bad. All right, here's Trump. Here's Trump.
By the way, I disagree with you.
Wait, what do you disagree with me on? I'll stop it right there.
Well, you said the American people basically are against the war in Ukraine, and I totally disagree with that.
I think the studies show that most Americans now do not believe we should be simply giving arms to Ukraine. They don't support that.
I disagree on that. I mean, it's a question of how much are you going to give them? Yeah, that's an issue. But everybody, anyway, the vast majority believe that it's necessary.
I don't believe that's correct.
To defend Ukraine. Otherwise, Putin wins, and you don't want that.
Well, that's what you don't want. But I think most Americans want to see the war end. They want to see the deaths, the carnage stop. And they certainly don't think we should be issuing a blank check to Ukraine.
Well, yeah, certainly nobody likes what's happening in the war, but we have really no choice as far as I can see. And most Americans, I think, see the same thing. Otherwise, Russia gets away with their aggression.
Well, that's again, that's your view, Arlen, but I don't think that's the view of most Americans. Let's see if we can get a little.
Okay, we'll disagree on that.
Well, let's just get a video. Let's just see if we can get a visual here, because every now and then I'm going to go off script. So here you go, Arlen. Can you see that?
Yep.
All right. So now, are we on the same page on this issue?
Well, when you say more U.S. aid, again, that is an issue. How much are we willing to give? But still, I think they know that we should be defending Ukraine.
Well, they may know it, but they're saying we shouldn't be giving them more aid. So how is that not?
Well, because
how does that not contradict exactly what you said? All right, so they're saying let's give no more. I mean, they oppose the war at this time. All right,
I'd have to see how that poll is worded and everything.
Well, I understand, but that it seems clear. All right, I got a bad screen up there. Let me get this back. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. We had a little bit of a visual challenge for one moment. Let's get John in Salinas. Good morning or afternoon, whatever it is. Hey, John, how you doing? I got to stop with the times. This is how you watch before we let you on, John. When you watch other streams, they never give the time. They never give the date. I have trouble with that because people could be watching at any time on any day. So I have to stop that. Hey, John, good to hear from you. Thanks for calling. How's it going?
Yeah, good morning. I'm doing well. Good morning. Good morning to Hal and to Arlen. Good morning. Hey,
good morning to you.
So, I mean, one of the awkward things that we sometimes have to talk about is who is ultimately to blame for the chemistry that we have in Washington, and it's the voters. The voters. Basically, everybody sitting in office today is there because they got a majority of the votes, and it there are primary challengers in there who are very progressive who just don't win, and so I don't ever hear you calling them out for that. You only seem to call out the Democrats that get elected, and you never want to talk about, sometimes I would say back in 2009 when there was unprecedented obstruction, and Harry Reid could have changed the filibuster rule and got a lot more passed, but he didn't. And so that's on them. But, there are many instances here recently where Democrats just cannot get around some of the procedural stuff. And, or like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema or whatever her name is.
I always struggle with that too. I have so much trouble with her name, but I think, John, and I might be wrong, it is Kristen Sinema. But I think that what gets us all flummoxed here is that she has the S-Y, I think, is in her last name, or is it S-I? I thought it was S-Y, so we're like, is it K-Y or K? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the stumbling block.
I think she deserves to be called Kirsten at this point.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that's what I would call her if somebody introduced her to me. I'd say, hey, how's it going, Kirsten?
I'm now saying Kirsten. I think you're right. It is Kirsten. What did I say, Kristen? It is Kirsten. You are spot on. I withdraw.
Kristen.
Go ahead.
Call her Kristen.
Call her whatever you like. We know who you're talking about.
All right.
Kirsten or Kristen Sinema.
Yeah. I emailed so that said, I emailed you a video this morning. I should probably send it to Arlen too, and maybe you guys can discuss this, but you might want to talk about it sooner. And basically, it has to do with a looming crisis. I don't consume cable or network news. I don't have television service.
That's why you're smarter than we are, or at least than I am. I don't know about Arlen. Maybe he doesn't.
I can't afford it. I can't
Now
afford
that's
it.
a
I'm
smart
like,
decision.
I'm
Who
having to-
can? Who can? It's like 300
Yeah,
bucks a
I
month or
know.
some crazy number. Most people are
Yeah.
cutting the cord if they can.
But I'm browsing YouTube, and this one investment channel is pretty cool. You should bookmark it and subscribe to it. Basically, Warren Buffett and his partner, what's his name, Muncie or whatever, at Berkshire, they're saying that there's a looming threat in the commercial real estate
Yeah, that could be
field,
really very,
basically.
very serious. I read an article about that, maybe
Yeah.
not by Buffett, but that cities, because there's so many office buildings now that are only partly filled or maybe vacant due to COVID, and now more and more people are able to telecommute. This could really gut cities that they'll just be empty. And I believe that's right. I think that I'm not saying, I think that's a very plausible situation where these cities, especially now, not like a New York or a San Francisco, which San Francisco has its own problems, and so does New York, but they have so many residents in the downtown area, they probably will be doing all right. But a lot of cities now, the downtowns are just offices, like Houston and cities like that, newer cities, maybe parts of San Jose. So they're really
ultimately-
could be a huge problem.
Ultimately, Hal, the problem is the inequality in our political and economic system. The rich keep getting richer. They're able to buy whatever they want to buy. And there's so many people who are going downward and not able to
True.
afford even basic needs.
But that
And-
also could be
Well, that-
easily laid at the feet of the
apropos.
Democrats as well.
Because, well, apropos what Arlen just said, because the most of those mortgages, commercial property mortgages, are structured in a way where the people who borrow the money can just walk away, and they're not. The bank is on the hook for the losses. It's not like buying a house, and so when you couple that with the fact that most of those loans are not loaned by big banks, most of those commercial property loans come from smaller banks. And so the real concern, at least what Warren Buffett was saying, is that these smaller banks are going to get crushed in the next few years, or the ones that are able to survive, they're going to stop lending. And those are the ones who small business owners go to first. You may even see some small business loans getting called in order for these banks to have to survive. So basically, small businesses, they think the domino effect is ultimately going to hit small businesses. And when, Arlen was talking about a wealth transfer going up, that's going to cause a huge wealth transfer going up. If small businesses start going out of business and bigger businesses or the big banks decide to get involved in that game like they did with rental, residential properties, you're going to have even more wealth concentration.
I think there'll be more inequality, but I don't know that the bigger banks will necessarily benefit so much. John, just for this reason, maybe you can provide a counterpoint, and then I do want to move on. I have a quick question for you. If the value of downtowns drops precipitously, I get how that could destroy small banks, put them out of business, and ruin small businesses. In fact, small businesses are already going to be suffering because the ones that cater to, say, the office workers, for example, the newsstands and the like, which we don't have paper news anymore anyway, the luncheonettes, they're all, on life support to begin with. My question to you, though, is how does that benefit the big fish, the sharks and the orcas in the sea?
Well, if the smaller banks go out of business, or they didn't predict that would happen, but if the smaller businesses go out of business because they can't get a line of credit to get them, through the hard times, and of course, this is only certain small businesses. There are small businesses where the owners have a lot of cash in the bank and they can weather a storm. But this will exacerbate wealth inequality.
No question.
if
No
those
question.
and if there was a business there that was, you know, making it, it was just seasonal. There might be investors who are willing to, you know, well-moneyed investors who are willing to come in and step in and take over.
Yeah, no, it's true. And
And
they could just also, the other thing that these long-term people do is they buy the property with the intent it could just be vacant for a decade. At some
Mhm.
point, the property, they believe the values will go up. Now, that probably is the case. I remember when I was in Akron, Ohio, which is pretty much an empty downtown, just recently was in Akron for some business work. It's an empty downtown, but actually it's an old industrial city, and there's some nice buildings that, at some point I think people will come back to downtown Akron, especially as energy prices continue to rise. You want to be close, cities become more appealing when energy prices go up. It's easier to walk places, save on gas or electricity. So, a long-term investor who can just have the property sitting there without generating any real capital, in the end, it could be poised to own everything. We've seen that in a lot of cities over time.
You know, I'd like to say something about the banks too, because that was, big banks, small banks. We know that the big banks are very much favored by the government, and they always get what they want. Remember the last big recession we had? They were bailed out by the government, but the average person was not. And so there were so many bankruptcies and lost homes and all that.
But who's to blame for that? Obama made the decision. I'm not saying W didn't have a lot of responsibility for that, Arlen, but Obama made the decision also to bail out the banks, not the underwater homeowners.
Well, they're so powerful. They're they always get.
Why do you give him an excuse? He's the president of the free world. He's the most powerful man in the world. He had a majority of the popular vote. Why give him any excuses?
Because whatever he does, the other side will say this is terrible.
So just because they might be acting in bad faith doesn't mean he didn't do the right thing.
And they have a lot of votes.
There was enough blame to go around. There were people who were, shooting craps with their life savings on just betting that real estate would go up and up and up and up and up. And there was a ceiling. There were just a lot of people not being wise with the money that they had saved. And I'm not saying that's an excuse for what he did, but
But the banks weren't wise either. But John, the banks were incredibly reckless.
I know, and they were very predatory upon those people. They were encouraging them to do it, on stated income and just higher interest rates or
bogus. What do they call those appraisals? The bogus appraisal. Hey, John, before you go, I want to just change this topic real quick, and we got to go, or return to the original topic. Do you agree with, I think, both of us, that Biden is really facing, waters? He's facing rough waters, and the Democrats need to figure something out.
I think I don't trust the polls, because every election we've had since Dobbs has favored the Democrats heavily, and regardless of what the polls said.
Well, that's since which one?
Oh, Dobbs, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Every election since then has favored Democrats immensely. Not just by small margins, but by large margins. I think the polls
interesting
don't really reflect what the outcome of an election is going to be anymore. I think whoever's the means that they're using to take those polls, I think they're flawed, and they need to come up with something else.
John, thanks a lot. I got to let you go at this point. We don't have that much time. I haven't given enough to Arlen. Arlen, let's get back to, what's her name? Kirsten Welker?
Yeah.
Kristen, I suppose. Sorry about that. I thought she did a nice job here, by the way. I agree with you on that. Trump's tough. Trump's tough to deal with.
No,
I don't talk to him.
Tell him that he should open a house?
No, I don't do that. I don't think he'd do that. I mean, he wouldn't do it based on me, no.
Did you talk to?
So he's just saying he's not behind the House impeachment efforts of Joe Biden. Probably true. I think that, to be perfectly fair to Trump on this one. And my sense is the Republicans are just jumping on this bandwagon because they know that their base wants retaliation for what they think is unfair treatment of Trump. But maybe you think he is a little bit more of a puppet master than he presents himself to be in that question and answer, Arlen.
Well, you can see what the Republicans are doing. They're going after the whole Biden family. They're, getting the Hunter Biden, and there's.
Well, he gave him the ammo. You got to say with Hunter, it's Hunter gave him all the ammunition they needed.
Yeah, but connecting Hunter to his father is very difficult because I think Joe Biden is smart enough not to get involved in those kind of.
Well, I mean, there was a response. I don't know who said this. David Ignatius in the Washington Post said, "I wish he hadn't gotten on the phone with those investors." Apparently, Biden did get on the phone with some of Hunter's investors.
Well, he loves his son very much, and he wants to help his son when he can. But he was very careful on all those calls not to get into business. He was just, hi, how's the weather, and all that kind of stuff. So, but the Republicans want to use that and try to, make it as a Biden crime family, which is absurd because Joe Biden has a reputation of being an honest, moral person. He's been in Washington for decades, and all of a sudden now he's a criminal and he's horrible and he's a Marxist, and it's just not true. But
well, he's certainly not a Marxist. I mean, This is the guy who went whole hog in privatizing student loans, is very responsible for the hundreds of thousands of one of the most responsible people for the hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that so many students and graduates face now at this time. So I would never agree that he's a Marxist. Let's get back to this interview real quick, Arlen. Here we go.
Do you think Republican hardliners should abandon their threat to shut down the government over their spending priorities now that there is this impeachment?
No, I think if they don't get a fair deal, we have to save our country. We have $35 trillion in debt. We have to save our country.
So you would shut down the government? You'd support that?
I'd shut down the government if they can't make an appropriate deal, absolutely.
All right, so I wanted to play that clip because to me that clip will really appeal to a very large portion of Americans. Trump is saying, and I think he's right, we have a real problem with the debt. I mean, it's enormous. It's gotten bigger and bigger. We have not addressed it. This is part of the reason that most Americans oppose more aid to Ukraine, as I pointed out earlier. And the Democrats seem incapable of addressing that issue. Their solution, the solution should be much higher taxes on the wealthy, cutting the military budget. Democrats seem incapable of really pushing for either of those two. Trump is saying we've got to cut the budget debt. I think that's going to help him.
That's interesting because Welker should have come back with, well, you increased the deficit quite a bit, Mr. Trump. What do you say about that? Because he did. He didn't try to, stop our spending. He increased it quite a bit.
Well, he certainly cut. I think the reason for that, Orlin, was the tax cuts more than the spending increases under Trump. But he certainly didn't pay for the cuts to the taxes. And I agree with you. That would have been a good comeback. And I think what you just said is a good comeback. Regardless, him saying that is going to provide, give him a wind to his sails for him to say that, because the Democrats, when they were in charge, did not do anything about the debt. And now you have you have this revolt of the right wingers in Congress who are demanding that the spending be cut, and Trump is pandering to them. I'm sure he would argue, well, I don't know what his argument would be. Both sides are totally complicit in raising the debt. I'm just making the point that he presents that argument pretty well. He's saying I would shut down the government.
And you've got a Republican Party that really isn't a party, as I've said before. They're really a personality cult. The people like Romney had to leave the party because he realizes they're no longer the conservative, reasonable party that they used to be, and now they've been taken over by these crazy MAGA cultists.
But remember, Romney is almost a billionaire who made his money through private equity closing businesses. And so right. Americans are very skeptical of his best, that he's on their side, and with good reason.
Yeah, well, I'm not a big fan of Romney either, but he was well respected, and with him gone, they're probably going to have another MAGA type person that'll take his place, and it's the Republican so-called party is just going to get stronger and stronger.
Maybe in Utah, but what the real solution again is for Democrats to champion working people, to not be faux populists, right wing populists like Trump, but true champions of workers, and they seem incapable of doing that.
Yeah,
And your argument is they can't do it because their money's too big, too influential. All right, let's go ahead.
Yeah, certainly, it's difficult for the Democrats to push in the direction we're talking about, real progressive thinking and proposing. But yeah, they really have to do that, and it's important, and it's not going to be easy, as I've said before, but they need to change direction.
So one of the solutions offered to the challenges that right now the Democrats and specifically Joe Biden are facing is offered by Maureen Dowd. I personally think who's a top columnist at the New York Times. And her, in terms, when I say top, I personally think she's very, very good. So when I say top, in my list, she's one of their best columnists, which isn't such a great compliment because I don't really think their columnists are very good, but she's about as good as they get there. And sometimes Tom Edsall. So her answer is, let's stop taking the mic out of Joe Biden's hands. Let's let him speak. He is scared now. He is worried that he'll say the wrong thing. His staff is not serving him well. What's your reaction to that, Arlen?
I kind of agree with Maureen Dowd on that. Joe Biden has to get out there. Otherwise, the Republicans are going to paint him as, the doddering old fool with crime, all this family crime going on. But he has to get out there and show them that, yeah, he's reasonable, he's helpful, and he could, make a big difference if he remains in office. So
that he can be a leader, that he can lead, and it doesn't look like that. Now, here's a quote that she provides where he says, I can't take questions. This was just a few days ago in Washington area because I'll get in real trouble, alluding to his handlers, his advisors criticizing him. And she says, hey, you're the leader of the free world. And she makes the point, Dowd does, that in the past when this has happened, because Biden has been prone to wander in terms of his speaking, and to digress, that when he's done that in the past, he just does it. And people say, okay, that's Joe, that's who he is. And they accept it. And so that would be a better solution than making him look like he's this toothless tiger that doesn't make decisions on his own. So I think that's fair.
Yeah, he's got to get away from his handlers on that, and he's got to really put himself out there because throughout his whole life he's had problems speaking. He had stuttering problems when he was younger, and he's going to do that. But if people can accept that and laugh about it, then he won't be painted as a doddering old fool.
And here she really lays it out. So I'll put the whole thing on the screen here, Arlen. His less than stellar inner circle, I guess she knows them because she's really an inside journalist. His ginger gait makes people, he has trouble walking. He doesn't have that brisk stride that Obama always had. Makes you worried, but it's also the staff's kind of walking at his elbow, kind of, giving him, a play-by-play, who's this, who's that. They overmanage him, white knuckles appearance. And this is creating the self-fulfilling prophecy that Biden is not really all there and is not physically or mentally up to the task. So I think this is exactly... Go ahead.
he's 80 years old, of course, and 80-year-old people are going to do some of the things that he does and be slow in certain areas, which is why the Democrats should, as we discussed, think of other candidates who are younger and more vibrant. And I hope that they come to that decision soon, because they can't wait too long. But at least for now, if Biden gets to talk about how well he's done as far as getting things passed, and there are accomplishments that he's had, and the voters need to know about them.
Well, she says that also. She points out that she thinks Biden, I explored this quite a bit last week after our program, Ignatius's column saying Biden shouldn't run. What I find somewhat ironic or interesting anyway is that she alludes to that this whole column is about letting Joe be Joe, unleash Joe, unshackle Joe. She brings up Ignatius's column, and then she said, where he says Biden should not run for re-election. But what I find sort of ironic about that, Arlen, is that Dowd, after giving all this advice, says she agrees. She actually comes out in support of an alternative to Biden. And I'm like, really? So because I think the problem, that's the wrong clip. Here we go. I don't disagree, but I doubt it will make a difference. In other words, she's saying that she does think Biden should step down or should not should endorse another Democrat. That's her position. I don't disagree. But she's saying it doesn't matter. The way the party treated him, the way Obama treated him, he ain't stepping down. He believes he should be president, and he is going to stay.
Well, I hope he looks at the polls and realizes he does have a lot of trouble right now. And he really has to consider whether he's helping the party by staying in office when he could be endorsing somebody else. Of course, you got the problem that if Biden steps down, he's going to have to have Kamala Harris take his place. And there's a lot of talk about Kamala Harris is not such a great candidate. So that's going to be a problem. But there are so many Democrats out there, governors and senators, that really could make a strong showing and put the progressive point of view out there. And that's what they need to be doing.
I found Dowd's column, and we're going to move on in a moment, but maybe this will be it. So we'll finish on this, and I'll let you have some more time, Arlen. The one issue I have with Dowd's column is she's saying you got to let Joe be Joe, you got to unshackle Joe. The problem with that argument is that in the past, he ultimately was compos mentis. Maybe he would ramble, maybe he would digress, maybe people would be scratching their heads at points. But in the end, he would make his position relatively clearly, even if I didn't agree with it. And even if he ultimately isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. But now I think you have the handlers are legitimately concerned that he really may simply not be mentally up to the challenge of being president. And I think that may be fair. So let's play this clip and you give your thoughts. If your view is now maybe he just isn't mentally capable of a very, I think we all agree, a very, very challenging, physically and mentally taxing job, being president. So here we go.
If you don't have a game plan, he may have a game plan. He just hasn't shared it with me. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed. We talked about at the conference overall, we talked about stability. We talked about making sure that the third world, the Southern Hemisphere had access to changes, had access. It wasn't confrontational at all. He came up to me and said,
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so a lot has been made of the exit music and all that, and some Dowd actually defended that, to defend him to an extent. But I'd like to know what you think about that presentation, Arlen.
I think he's still got it. I mean, he's still got the intelligence and ability to make good decisions, but obviously he is prone to gaffes and looking like he's having some trouble, but I just think that's Joe Biden. But again, I think the Democrats would be better off with somebody who's younger, more vital, because people do recognize when you're 80 years old, you're not going to do the best possible job that you're capable of. So yeah.
I heard what John said. John said, "Don't trust the polls. The polls have tended to favor Republicans. In other words, the Democrats have done better. They've outperformed the polls since the decision on Roe v. Wade." I think that's fair, but I think it's also fair to point out that in both of Trump's elections, he did significantly better than the polling suggested. So that is a figure that may cancel out the Dobbs effect, right? Is the Trump effect. Trump did lose to Biden, but he performed better in a number of states, and it was closer than a lot of people thought it would be. And because he was losing to Biden pretty clearly, more clearly than he was losing to Hillary, if memory serves, and he still came close. He lost, but he came close. Biden
didn't come that close.
He didn't come that close. He came relatively close in the Electoral College. That's fair. But still, I think the race, it was a little closer than people had expected even. But certainly he outperformed the polls against Clinton. So, I think you have to factor that in too. So we don't know. There are a lot of problems with Biden stepping down. A month ago, I thought it was a dumb idea. But now, based on what you've said, based on what we've read, I think they need to do it.
And John is right that the elections lately have favored the Democrats more than the polls have shown. And they've won some races that were kind of upsets, like in Kansas, and any state that has the abortion issue on the ballot is favorable to the Democrats. So, those things have to be considered also. And maybe the poll is not as accurate as some people think it might be.
Arlen, any final words?
Well, I just think it's going to be a very ugly next few months. And, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But again, I think we both agree that Biden should, for the good of the party, should say, hey, maybe I'm not the right person at this point, and I should, to help the party by getting someone in there who's younger and can, become more popular than he can.
Arlen, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to join. I hope you feel like you're getting your words in. I always worry about that, especially when we get callers. We'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll be back in a week. Again, Arlen, thank you. Thanks for calling. Thanks all who are watching. Tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the business's responsibility to an employee who has real challenges.